dans le cadre de notre séminaire. La parole est à vous. Merci.
Merci. Et merci pour la possibilité de parler un petit peu de l'archéologie subaquatique en Suisse. Je vais changer en anglais, parce que ça c'est une catastrophe si je parle en français. Il me manque les mots. En anglais c'était peu plus mieux, j'espère. Eh bien, pour commencer, to start, well, I think it's the only lecture you have from a person who is not a member of the European community. But it doesn't matter because archaeology is all over the world, it's the same. And we are really in the center of Switzerland, the center of Europe in our point of view. So we have a lot of connections, traffic from north to south, east to west. So we are really, I think we feel to be part of Europe, even if we are not a member of the EU. I want to give you, in the next long hour, some glimpses, some spots on different parts, questions of underwater archaeology in Switzerland. So at the end, I hope you have a picture of the whole thing. And I try to do it a little bit in a totally chaotic way, not structured. So we jump from one period to another, from one lake to another one. So at the end, I hope you have an impression about what we are doing since the 1960s. First thing I want to start with modern times and underwater archaeology and prehistory. There was an exhibition in Sevilla some years ago, the World Exhibition, and the Pavillon de la Suisse was titled with La Suisse n'existe pas. And that's really true. It's a funny country. It's just the name Switzerland, but it's a conglomerate of 26 different cantons. And every canton has its own legislation, and every canton is free to decide what and which way and with which things he wants to do his archaeology. So we have in Switzerland only 2 professional diving groups, but we have 2 diving groups. We have a lot of lakes. The center of our country, the Midlands, are full of lakes, and we have 2 professional diving groups, one in the western part, in Lac de Bienne, and the other one, Lac de Zürich, on the eastern part. 2 professional diving groups working all over the year, from January to December, 5 to 6 people who are doing their work all over the year in the waters. Let's zoom it a little bit closer to Switzerland. We are surrounded by a lot of big countries: Italy, France, Germany, Austria, and also Fürstentum Liechtenstein. So we have 5 countries all around. And if we look at the country geologically, very simply spoken, we have three parts. We have the mountain parts in the south, where hardly any people live in these valleys. There are some, but not very much. About 60% of the whole country is covered by mountains. Then we have this green part. These are the Midlands, quite flat, some hills, and a lot of lakes. And the northwestern part is an older mountain region, the Jurassic part. So if you speak of underwater archaeology, it's really in this green region. We have 4 languages we speak, and I tell you why. That has a prehistoric reason. That's very interesting, and it still works today. We have 4 languages. The most common spoken is, it's not German. We really don't like that. We speak Swiss with a lot of dialects. It's totally different to Germany. So if you are some 30, 40 kilometers in Germany, they don't understand us anymore. So we speak Swiss here in this violet parts. Then we have in the southern parts, south of the mountains, we have the Italian spoken, about 6–7% of the people. In the western part of the country, it's French, of course. And in the valleys, we have some, we call it Rätoromanisch, Romanic. It's quite close to the Latin. And if you read it, if you hear it, it's quite understandable. It's really close to Italian, close to the French. So, but what you see here is this northern, eastern thing, and on the other side, this western and southern thing. And if we look at this in another way, religion, that's in the central, in the eastern, and more in the western part, we have the Catholic dominance. And in other parts, it's quite 50-50 or a little bit more the Protestantic way. You can choose every topic you want. You will find these frontiers. If we are playing cards, you play in the southern and the western part, you play it still today with the French cards. And in the northeastern one, you play it with the German ones. We have some very nice traditions in winter, where we have things like that, and the children are walking around. These things you only find in the northeastern part of our country and not in the French-speaking parts or in the Italian-speaking parts. And as a country of democracy, we have a lot of votings a year. 4 times a year we can vote about something. We want it not. There was a couple of years ago, there was one vote about do we want to buy some military air fighters? And you see the picture. It's the same as we had it with the cards and with other things. We have always this invisible frontier in our country. Another thing is older people. Who is doing his gymnastics, who is looking to be in good shape. And you have the same thing. It's the northern and the eastern part that are doing a little bit more for their sanity than the other ones. So why is that? This is because of prehistory. The idea of settlements, cattle, the Neolithic ages, this idea came from the Near East and was spread over 2 ways into Middle Europe. The one was along the coasts, impressa, ceramics, cardial, going up through the River Rhone and came into the western part of Switzerland. On the same time, the whole thing happened also along the Danubian River upwards and came to the eastern part of Switzerland, all within the 5th millennium BC. And what we have as archaeologists, 5000 BC, 4500, we have these 2 ways coming into Switzerland, manifesting with different kind of pottery, some more round things in the western and the southern part, and this flat-bottomed pottery in the northeastern part. And this border, this prehistoric border, it changed a little bit in the country, about 100, 200 kilometers, more west, more east. But at the end, it's the same frontier we have still in our country today. So we call it, if you are Swiss, you are eating and drinking the other way. If you are, it depends a little bit on which side of the border you live. We call it, this Asterix thing, la Grande Fossée. And it's the same, we have it, this Grand Fossé between western and eastern part, eating rösti, that's a sort of potato making, or we eat it not. So sometimes if we talk about prehistory, we talk about archaeology and underwater archaeology. In Switzerland, it's really very close to our modern habitat we're living in. Every day we have this frontier, we meet it, and that's why I like really underwater archaeology, because you are working on the things why Switzerland is such a funny country. Well, what you have all over the world, if you're talking about archaeology, it's of course the history of all these researches in the 19th, 20th century. We had the first discoveries, and that's what I'm mainly talking about today, our prehistoric lake sites. We hardly have any shipwrecks. We have a lot of prehistoric sites at the shore of the lakes. They have been found in the midst of the 19th and the second half of the 19th century because the sea levels went down because of dry winters. and suddenly you had at a lot of lakes, you had these fantastic fields of prehistoric piles, and in between the piles you had a lot of objects from older times. So there the whole thing started. There, as everywhere, a lot of people who did their own excavations in the 19th century, and a lot of things we know about these prehistoric sites is based on these excavations from the 19th century. A lot of these sites we never visited again, and as you see here, you find them in the water, but you also find them in the wetlands, and it's the same. So it's not such a big difference if you're examining them diving or doing it like these people here on the dry side. At the end, it's the same. Are the same archaeological structures. A lot of these things had been observed very well. There were a lot of publications about the whole thing. For Switzerland, it's another very important thing. Switzerland was founded 1291, but really with this modern way of being Switzerland, coming together after the big wars in Napoleon area, was 1848. We got a new constitution. For 1848, 6 years later, the first pile dwellings, lake sites, prehistoric lake sites were found. Switzerland was searching for an own identity against the French people, against the German ones, and this discovery of the prehistoric sites was one possibility to show we are different. We are a known nationality, a known community, and that's why we went to les expositions universelles, the world exhibitions in Paris and elsewhere, and we showed our stone axes and our pottery, because that was our own history, and that's what the things we were showing, talking about. There are a lot of really nice and fantastic pictures and museums founded, pictures made. The idea of the 19th century, what did we found there? You remember these piles, these pile fields? First there was an idea that is one thing that happened, that must be the piles of a platform. And the first scientist who tried to do an interpretation about that, he remembered some old pictures from ethnographic pictures in Asia and in Africa. And so he said, well, they live there on platforms on the lakes, so that's the same thing here. What he didn't know first was that these piles are a summary of 2,000, 3,000 years of settlement activities, and that the objects they found there are also from 20, 30, 40 different villages there. It's just a big, complex mixture of the whole thing. But at the end, it was a lot of cantons, a lot of museums founded, a lot of societies, antiquarian societies, and the people really were fan of the whole thing. Today, every year we have to explain why we need so much money for archaeology. In the 19th century, it was no question. We have a lot of people who tried to be a little bit like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. So what's interesting, if we look at the history of this discoveries of these researchers, there was one diving attempt in the 18th century, in the 19th century. It was this one at Lac Léman, Lake of Geneva. He was there for a couple of minutes. He found nothing, but at the end he was in one of these submerged lake sites. We started in the 1960s. In the 1960s, there were some sport divers who asked for permission to dive in the Lake of Zürich. And they got it because we thought there are no places anymore. It's all destroyed by the building activity in the city of Zürich, because they wanted to dive really in Zürich, jump out into the river, into the water. And it was really a big surprise when we realized that there are really a lot of remains from prehistoric sites. Here you see one of these classic stratigraphies. You see the dark layers. These are the cultural layers of the people when they were here. These white ones is when the lake rised, and you have some calcic sedimentation. Then lake goes back, people come again, and so you have this black and white thing all over the years. And at the end, about 25 piles per square meter. So it's really not easy to excavate the whole thing. Problem in the beginning was, and it's still today, if you are there underwater and you are working, you are within 10 seconds, you have no visibility anymore because you are tumbling the whole surface. So and that was also a very early invention where these tubes, you have some pumps pressing the water into these tubes, and these tubes have some small outcomings here, so you have an artificial streaming. And if you're working here and you have this tube under you, the whole thing is going away, so you have always the quite good visibility to work there underwater. It's of course there are suits. It's not the Mediterranean. It's and if you're diving all over the year, it's in winter it's 4 degrees, 3 degrees. Sometimes it's freezing while you're working down. It's freezing on the surface. At the end, perhaps if you're really good prepared here and you stay for a couple of months in the site, it's about 2 hours of diving in the afternoon, in the morning 3 hours. So 5 hours underwater in winter. It's quite hard. Sometimes you need an explanation. Oh, I can't dive. I have something problems with my back, or I have to do some statistics with the ceramics. Because on Wednesday, Friday, it really you feel the whole week working in the water. So that was about the history. What about modern times? Well, it's still the same. We have these dry suits. We have in Lac de Bienne and in the Lake of Zurich, we have still these 2 professional diving groups, about 6 people, working all over the area there. There are 2 or 3 are sometimes underwater. Of course, you have to repair the whole things. You have to do the administration stuff and so on. I'll show you later what in detail we are really doing. At the end, it's not so much work underwater. But in working, it's the same as you do it on sur terre ferme, in the dry situations. You are destroying the original, so you have to document it. You have to describe it, you have to make drawings, you have to take some photos. This is one of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites just in Zurich, 5 meters away from the quay where the people are promenading. You see these piles, everyone gets a number. You see the stratigraphy, every layer gets its own number. You're doing it, drawing it, then you go back and do verification of the whole thing. Takes quite a long time. Normally we are really in the lakes. I would say 99% of the work we're doing in Swiss underwater archaeology is in the lakes. We started the last years a little bit doing some more things in the rivers. Here's a medieval mill in the River Rhine, but that's not common. What you see here is it's a little bit different way of diving. We are doing normally, or you see from the sport divers, the bottle is not on the back. The bottle is on the buoy, on the surface of the water, and on the back you have the weight. Because in winter you look a little bit like a Michelin figure. You have your dry suit, you have a lot of things under, so at the end you need some 28, 32 kilos of weight. If you have that here, after half an hour you have problems. So you have it a little bit more on the whole back, and it works quite well like that. And underwater archaeological situation with the infrastructure. Normally, we have these bottles on the buoy. If we are longer somewhere, we try to have a direct connection to the compressor, so you don't have to change the bottle. So you can really stay as long as you want. Because sometimes you are hungry or you have to go to the toilet. But theoretically, you could start at 9 o'clock in the morning, working and coming out at 5. You have the compressor, and you have some installations here, and then you go underwater. You have this artificial streaming things here. You have the air. So really, you can stay there. You have your square meter, and you do that for your day, for your week, for your month, all over the year. This illustration here was made a site in the Lake of Greifensee, where we had an excavation over 12 years. At the end, we had excavated a whole late Bronze Age village. At the end, there were 35 years of underwater working there. I think it's one of the biggest underwater archaeology projects we ever had. And you have the same things to do as you have to do it on an excavation in normal conditions, not underwater. You have all the things you need, you take with you for the documentation, for taking samples of the wood. And at the end, looks here a little bit, you see this here is a late Bronze Age house site, and you have these three divers working there and doing their work all over the day. And today, sometimes we have only to check some pile fields. And it goes quite quick with this instrument. It's a GPS, and you can just point on the piles, and then you can check the whole pile field and have all the documentation, the dates, and you are quite fast in how long is it, how deep, and how much things are around. Another thing is masks with underwater communication. It's easier to talk like this than every time to go up and to talk on the surface and then to go down. But at the end, it's the same as we had here at the opera site in Zurich, some 50 meters away from the coast today, the shoreline in Zurich. But it had been once lake region. We had a huge excavation with about 50 people working there and doing the same thing as you do it as a diver. You have the stratigraphy, you have these cultural layers, you have a lot of piles, and you need a really good organization not to have at the end a big mess with the materials and the informations. Well, the wood is very well preserved because it's always wet, it's always not in contact with the air, it's really sedimented, it's really in the sediments. And so if you try to take an oak sample, it's really, you work hard underwater because it's really, after 5,000 years, still a really hard wood you have to saw. It's very interesting, all these samples. That's why we started also in the 60s with the laboratory of dendrochronology. We have now 10,000 of samples. I think I don't have to explain the principle. Take modern samples, you go back, hanging back. And now we are with the Zurich lab, we are back to the 9th millennium BC. And gives you different samples. We also started once with things from, we had once a Rembrandt. Is it a Rembrandt or not? Are the oaks, the pictures painted on, is it too young for Rembrandt? Was he dead or was he still alive? And it goes back to medieval sites, bridges, and so on. And at the end, you are in the prehistoric lake sites, in these villages, and you have there a lot of very interesting samples. With if you have the last ring, you can date them on the year, exactly on the year. So that's a little bit the first introduction. A lot of interesting history, the last 100, 150 years. Today, there's 2 professional diving groups working for their cantons, or now, since the last 10 years, for other cantons to get some money. Because our government here in Zurich says, well, underwater archaeology is not really something the government has to do. So we have to try to get some money from elsewhere. But on the other side, it's archaeological sites, it's protection. It's a little bit a mixture of political questions, science questions. Well, in the 19th century, when it started, the whole thing, there was Switzerland, and we tried to have our national feelings with these first finds. But of course, we realized with the years there are some more. Today, we know there are a lot of much more interesting sites on the Balkanian region. But if you look around the Alps, they are now all around the Alps. We have these prehistoric sites from the Neolithic, early and late Bronze Age. Starts about 4,300, 4,500 before Christ. The last ones are about 800, 820, beginning of Iron Age. So 6 countries at the end with their own sites and their own management of the sites. Of course, you have this general legislation of the UNESCO, but of course, at the end, you have your legislation of the country. And in Switzerland, it's much more complicated. You have the legislation of the 15th different cantons who have lakes and prehistoric sites. And an interesting aspect, I think, is, and that's one of the main things I always tell the people, I think it's really important to know what we are responsible for. You can't go into the water and to do something. You have to be sure that you do the right thing at the right place. If you look in the 19th century, how many sites we knew? That's the Lake of Zurich. At the end there is Zurich itself on the left side there. About a dozen sites. Some of them are now, they are marked with the black point. They are now UNESCO World Heritage. So we know all about Europe, about 1,100 sites, and 111 were now on the list for UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The other 900 are associated sites. And from this 111, half of them are in Switzerland, and on this lake about 7, I think. Well, that's a picture of the 19th century, and that's what we did with our inventory project in 1996 to 2000, and you see how many new sites we discovered. And you see how many of them are now become World Heritage Sites too. So it's really important to first, before you work and before you do your investment in a site, you have to be sure, is it the right one? So a statistic about that. There was the low levels in the 19th century. We had another very, very low level in 1920, 1921. There was another jump of numbers of new discovered sites. And then that's the development of underwater archaeology. And now here was our inventory we started. I told you of this late Bronze Age village. We were there for 12 years. We just did that, nothing else. We didn't treat the other 90 stations. We just were there. And then we started to do the other thing, and now we have a totally different picture of the priorities and all that. That was a funny time, 1996. I love this time when we were there. We did, every day we did one kilometer diving in the zigzag along the shore of the lake. Hey, a new station. Oh, an old one, but it's bigger. One kilometer a day, 1 day of first documentation of the site, and then we went further. So we did the whole Lake of Zurich, all the other lakes in Zurich. It was such a big success that other cantons asked us. So I think today, now we are quite sure that we know all the prehistoric sites in our lakes, most of them. And the first things, we really did some very simple thing. No, 1996, it was also not so easy with GPS, but really we just took some measures. It's 50 meter wide, it's 200 meter long, it has this and that. We did some drillings. Is there, under the surface of the lake, are there some archaeological layers? It's quite easy to do, and we had also the chance to document the whole thing underwater, and then went further. And we did that also in some of the central Switzerland lakes. It was really fun. It was all over the year we were outside. Every day was different, and this for 4 or 5 years. I think it was quite the best time of my life in doing underwater archaeology. Sometimes we're really happy. So you see one of these results of the drillings here with the cultural layers, some 5-6 centimeters under the sea level. The problem is today that all these sites, they survived very well for the last 3,000 to 5,000 years. But at the end of the 19th century, people began really to influence the sea levels with the whole industrialization, with all the fabrics, textile fabrics in Switzerland, in Zurich. So a lot of the sea levels went down 1 meter, 2 meters. So you have a totally new management of the lakeshore geography, and a lot of erosion. On the other side, the natural vegetation vanished because of pollution of the water. So at the end, we had no roots to hold the sediments together. A totally different way of the waves they come to the shore. So we find today, even if you are not diving, you have some Bronze Age wooden structures laying there underwater. You can, from the boat, say, look at there's something, and then you check it, and you see you have some Bronze Age constructions not in situ, still gone. And if you look a bit around, you find some objects, early Bronze Age and other things. We had once in the lake of Zug, it was really a lucky thing, we found, as a reconstruction, a massive object with berg, that's berg, penetrated with some geometric patterns here. With what's the English word? It's like it's also from the berg. You do it. It's like you can use it for chewing gum, but you can also use it to pitch, yeah, something like that, yeah. So that's the second thing we want to do. First, to discover the sites, and then to find out what's the scientific potential. And what about the erosion there? Is it fast or is it no problem? So we try to check every station, and sometimes it's really surprising what we find. That's one of our huge tubes for our drinking water for Zurich. We get the water out of the Lake of Zurich from 25-30 meters depth. And building these things, and they were built in the 70s, 80s, sometimes they destroyed in a linear way some of the sites. And one of them was so interesting because we find some bell beaker sherds. Bell beaker is something you normally do not have on the lake shores. And here we had it, and we had it in a layer with late corded ware, so we have dendrodated bell beakers here. So this is one of the really interesting sites. One of the sites also now is on the list for the UNESCO World Heritage. And at the end, when we tried to have a survey all over Switzerland, that's a picture you have. You remember this green Midland part of Switzerland here? You have all these sites on all the lakes. You have 15 different responsibilities, 15 different Archäologie cantonal. 2 of them have their diving groups. There are some, they do nothing. They have their sites, but they do nothing because they are perhaps strong in Roman archaeology, and all the investment and all the budget goes to the Romans, but they will never look into the water. And in Zurich, for example, or here in the western part, Lake of Neuchâtel and Lake de Bienne, there's a good presence of the diving group. So the idea of trying to put the first underwater archaeological heritage to UNESCO World Heritage was born at the Lake of Bienne. They asked us in Zurich, and then we said, let's try it. We tried that 2004. That was just 150 years after the first discovery of these sites.
It took another 7 years, but since 2011, these 111 sites are now on the as first underwater archaeology heritage on the list of the World Heritage of UNESCO. Some of them are really in natural protection zones. There's no problem to manage them. Other ones are really in the city of Zurich with a lot of ships, a lot of things happening, a lot of building activity. Here we really have also a lot of problems to manage the whole thing. Well, let's take a view to the city of Zurich. We have just now an excavation 150 meters away from the lake, but it's the same. It's a late Neolithic site. It's terrible noisy, and it's a huge thing, but it's the same thing as you would do it underwater. That's quite silent. That sometimes it's really nice to work underwater. You don't have the whole noise is not there. You have a lot of sites at the end of this lake because the river goes out. It's also today it's one of the most nice spots in our canton. And if you look at how it looks like today, that's Zurich today. And if you jump some 6,000 years back, you have this situation. And you see you have some islands, peninsulas, bays, and so on. So it's really an ideal place for doing for putting the village there. And we have now with everything building activity near the lake, we have some archaeology there. In the 19th century, they had very good maps they did about the sites where discovered. Also two on islands. What we have as an instrument in the canton of Zurich for the protection of the whole thing, we call them archaeological zones. These are well, it's all covered because it's the medieval part of Zurich. But every building activity, they have to give us the information that they want to do something. And so we have the possibility to check it in advance. Is it possible or is it not possible? And the things interesting for the underwater archaeology are, for the moment, are these three. Here we have the problem of a lot of it's like boat parking with change and buoys and a lot of traffic there. This one has a problem. We have all the tourist ships from Zurich. They're starting here, and they're really going here this way. It's 5 meter and a half deep, but it's still enough movement of the waves from a ship that destroys the things there. And this one has the problem that here you have the streaming now going out of the lake, the river Limmat. Old picture, that's the station, late Bronze Age station of Altenkirch. It's also a World Heritage Site. You see all these flat parts. That's the part where also the settlement is. And here now it goes then a little bit deeper, 4 meters. And this is about 0.5 meter to 3-4 meters. And you see also the house there for the boats, this private sailing club. And when they did that in 1911, they had a huge destruction happened there, and a lot of material coming out. It's about here. It's 1961. It's one of the last times the Lake of Zurich was frozen. And a very simple map showing where we have the problems if you want to manage this site. You have this this part here that's destroyed. It's nothing to do anymore. You have the red parts. Here are the cultural layers on the surface. Here are the piles on the surface. It's really something happening here. These are the parts we have to do something. And the yellow one is it's still covered by sterile sediments. So there's protection, natural protection. There's nothing to do. The material is very interesting because we have a lot of bronzes here. It's one of these former central places, much richer than
all other late Bronze Age sites we know. There's a lot of materials coming from Scandinavian regions, from northern Italy, a lot of connections and trade we see here with the objects. And we had one diving once a day when we discovered this object here. It's about 30 centimeters, a wooden thing. I don't know, you can choose what you want, what it is. But it's not the first one, it's the second one we found 100 years before in the lake of Bienne, also ornamented with geometric ornaments. And it was really just, there was a chain of a boat, and the chain did it, made it free. It was sedimented, the chain moved, and then it came out. One day before, perhaps we wouldn't have found it because it was still covered. One day after, it would have been destroyed. It was really that day we discovered it on the right time. So it's very important to have a high presence on all these sites to avoid destructions like this. Another one is still a discussion now in Zurich with if you have high waters, you see that, then you have really a very strong streaming and a very, very strong erosion of the sites. But Lake of Zurich is one of these lakes all around the Alps. We have the best sedimentation conditions. That was near the opera. And here really you have the first ones about 4,000 before Christ up to the late Bronze Age. A massive stratigraphy, not easy to handle, with a lot of different cultures, Neolithic, Bronze Age, and a lot of piles. Sometimes some 30, 35 piles a square meter. You hardly found the cultural layers because it was just all sticked with younger piles. And a couple of 4 or 5 years ago, we had the problem that there was a big parking project just some 50 meters away from the stratigraphy, where you had these 50 excavators doing these excavations. Oops, sorry. You see the same thing here, these different cultural layers. And the excavation was in the parking. They first did the roof, and then we went down and we made the excavation and we had the roof there. It was quite interesting, but it was never raining. That was fine. We had some really nice finds. A door. We have about 2 or 3 doors now in Switzerland from these times. It's about 3000 BC. We have some clothes and hats. That's one of a hat. We know a lot of them from Lake of Constance. So this is really one of the big centers with a lot of very interesting sites in Zurich itself, and important sites. These late Bronze Age sites are incredible. And then we had, and that was the thing I was doing about 10, 12 years. We were at the Lake of Greifensee, and we did 12 years of excavation in one late Bronze Age site. At the end, you must say it was really a one-horse town. It's one of these not very interesting towns, small one, not very rich. But at the end, we had the possibility to examine a whole village. There was nothing else. They came once there. 10 years later, they went, and you have. It's like a prehistoric Pompeii. And also here you see the flat parts of the water, 1, 2 meters. It's a little bit brighter, and then it goes down to 4 or 5 meters. And so we were there and had our whole infrastructure there with the compressor and all that. Sometimes it was quite lovely, sometimes it was very exponented. But at the end, and that was the most interesting thing, we had really this map of a village. Started with these 2 houses there in the center, J and H, about 1052 before Christ. And the last ones were these small ones, 1043. Within these 9 years, all happened. We had thousands of samples for dendrochronology, and we can now really reconstruct what happened within these 9 years. They had these 2 buildings,
in the center. You had the other ones coming a little bit later, together with his fence, his fortification fence. And interestingly, 2-3 years later, it was useless, and they built the last buildings and crossed this fence. And that's all happened within 9 years. And the other thing is we had the whole material, 2 tons of ceramics, and all the bronzes and all that were still laying approximately at the houses that were used 3,000 years ago. It's not very deep. Diving sometimes is half a meter. It's really hard to go underwater. Sometimes it's a little bit more. But that gives an impression of one of these houses, the divers having their lines to the compressor, having their artificial streaming here, and are documenting the late Bronze Age house. So some of the houses had these block constructions. It's really like we know it from the Alps, 3,000 years old, and you have the feeling that it was just done a day before. It's so fresh, all the marks of the working. Some information about how it could look like a little bit higher in the houses, and at the end we had these constructions. Fundament, the block construction, the house a little bit, the living platform a little bit higher, and at the end 24 houses. The constructions itself, absolutely fantastic. Every house had its own solution. So if you find something and you have the idea that's it, there's not. You have really here, sometimes you had the idea, they had a competition. Every wooden craftsman tried to do it a little bit cooler than the other one. Other things are also, other things were interesting. We had at the end, we had the possibility, because the preservation was so well, to put different timbers together to reconstruct them that came from the same tree. And so we had the possibility to connect different houses in the village, because they used the timber from the same tree, and they had the similar pottery, for example. So you had the idea of feeling a little bit familiar constructions. A lot of pottery, all burned, a lot of things burned. So we think 9 years later the whole village burned down and they left the place. Sometimes some 20, 30 kilos per square meter, just storage pottery together. You had a layer like that. It was no cultural materials, only pottery. And so at the end, we tried to find out where's the pottery, and we have 2 buildings there. There were so many things in it that you can't live there. It's only full of pottery, 400, 500 individuals. And we have other ones where we think that's the small ones. There was also not so much activity, not so much material. There was more storage than living there. Well, that's the thing we did the last 100, 150 years. Underwater archaeology is lakesides, Neolithic, Bronze Age villages. A couple of years ago, we started to, with the inventory, also to look at all the other structures we find in the lakes. It was a decision because at the end, you must say, there are 6 people diving all over the year. There are about 90 stations in the canton of Zurich. You have to look for them, monitoring them, visiting them, gaining some new informations. You can't afford to do something else. Looking for shipwrecks or other constructions is really a decision you have to make. As a pilot, we started with doing something else because we knew that for the whole time we were in the water, there are some fishing, trapping structures. If you look at the aerial photos, you see them, all these zigzag structures all over the lake in the flat areas. You find them all over the way. And we always thought, well, they are end of 19th, beginning of 20th century. You know that. You can read that in newspapers. You talk with the fishermen people there. And they tell you, yeah, my grandfather, he used them, all that. So we did some samples, radiocarbon samples, of a lot of these structures. We tried to check a little bit in the deeper waters where we find them. And at the end, it's quite a surprise. Now we are back to the 13th, 14th century. We are in the medieval times, and I'm sure it will take a little bit time, but we will find also prehistoric ones. And one of the most interesting things we also found was one skeleton in the lake of Greifensee. It was a radiocarbon dated Iron Age, 500 BC. It's a little bit complicated to look at. You have the legs here and the feet. You have the fish, and you have the rest is lying between the legs. So sometimes the water police told us if you have some people who commit suicide, you won't find them the first 2, 3, 4 weeks. They sink down, and then there's some gas building, and that's why they, after 3, 4 weeks, they sit in the water. And if the process goes further and the gas goes away, at the end the body falls in between the legs or falls on the other side. And this one falls between the legs. So that's a typical situation of a water individual sunk in the water, perhaps fall out of the boat. We don't know, but it's 2,500 years old. It's interesting. It's all still on the right place. So it must also be an erosion that now we see him. 1 year, 2 years later, it would be vanished. But it was just the right moment to discover this individual and to document it. Another aspect, the Midlands. We never did some surveys in the mountains. And we had once a sport diver who told us, hey, I'm living in the Alps, I'm diving there, and I discovered a prehistoric site in 35-meter depth. So we said, okay, it's nice, give us some pictures. And we tried a little bit to check also the history of the lake, what happened at that lake, because every lake has its own history. So it's always the conditions change. And the lake of en français c'est le lac des quatre cantons. It's really in the center of Switzerland. And one part here, that's Lucerne, that's in the Midlands, but the rest of the lake goes really into the Alps. And what's interesting here, it's quite a stormy region in different ways. There was once a quarry slipping, and you see there a lot of material wave, and you had like a little tsunami because of this material that slipped into the water. People told that was about 10, 15 meters high. That's an interesting thing because it's also a region, this region in Switzerland, where you have a lot of earthquakes. And there had been a big one in 1601 where half of the city of Lucerne was destroyed. And there are some historical documents who said, well, it was the water of the river went away because of the earthquake and then came as a big wave back to the city and destroyed a lot of it. So it's really an interesting region. And that's why the university, the limnologists, did a lot of drillings there in the middle of the lake, and you have this fine stratigraphy normally, and then you have this event of 1601 with a lot of material coming down, like this quarry slipping, but a lot of material more, some 4 or 5 meters. And they did some reconstructions. And they saw there are a lot of these things happening all over the millenniums in this lake, and on different parts. And they tried to
to put this point where the sport diver said, well, I found something. There's also one of the slippery. The site is about here. And there had been one of the slippery, and they reconstructed it with these waves going then through all corners of the lake, 2 meters, 3 meters. At the end, only 1 meter. But there was something that happened. Well, it was a big thing for the journalism. And then they made this, that's about 25 meters. It was not so strong, but a lot of things can happen. And so we went to this place. It's really, you are really in the Alps now. It goes up to 2,400 meters from here, from the level. And the pictures he showed us were these. It's a classical prehistoric site. The thing was that he's sports diver, he goes deep. And at the end we realized he found the rest of the slipped village really in this 30, 35 meters deep. But the rest is still hanging there on 8 meter, 9 meter under the lake level now. But the piles are sometimes really like this. And if you look a little bit closer, you see the whole pottery lying there. So it's our first pre-alpine settlement on a lake in Switzerland. And it's interesting, some of the pottery is in one of the gaps we don't have settlements at the lakes in the Midlands. It seems a little bit another circumstances they here. Well, underwater archaeology, next one. Very wet, not in the water, at the water, wetlands. But there was in the 30s, there was found a lake, Bronze Age site, really at the shore of the lake. And now we have here, more than a kilometer away, this industrial zone, and with this this circle, this blue, that was the next building planned. It was something I never met in my life. It was a rescue excavation, and the only thing we found there was wood. Wood, and sometimes wood. Looks like that. Thousands of wooden pieces, timbers. We had 5 to 5 meter. We had 2 days time to documentate that. It was quite speedy thing. But at the end we had an image. It was interesting that a lot of these timbers in this one layer were shingles covering the roofs with a lot of rings, perfect for dendro. Here's some examples. Some burned. And they had the same age as this site on 1 kilometer far away. Here's some pictures of these excavations in the 1930s. Very well done, perfect preservation. The most interesting thing is, if you compare these curves, you have the black one is from this village, and the gray one is from this site at the industrial zone. They are so similar. It must be sometimes it must be the same tree, or at least really the same region. There are some of the curves are really so similar that we think we have this village, and the village was destroyed, and the storm took the material, took it all over the bay, 1 kilometer far away for a resedimentation. And within the last 3,000 years, this thing is now dry land, but it had been lake 3,000 years ago. So that's one of the nice discoveries. And then we thought, well, that's quite fine. But there was another layer coming with another concentration of the material. And this one was also very special. You see there the people excavating, and you see these huge timbers. And if you look at them a little bit more in detail, these are some trapezoid structures, 12 to 15 meters long. And here we had no chance to date them by dendro, so we took some radiocarbon, and we've seen we are somewhere in the 14th century BC. That's an area we don't have a lot of samples, that's why it was difficult. But with this information, we tried again and had at the end some dates about 1370 BC. This is the biggest one. It's an incredible 15.5 meter long trapezoid construction. It's not very well done. It's really not good done. It's you see sometimes it doesn't suit very well. It was really they had to work hard. It was something to do very quick, to use, and then it's not worth anymore. 3,000 years later, it's a little bit another thing. It's the only structures in this way we know here. I found once something somewhere in a river here in Belgium, found at the end of the 19th century, also at trapezoid construction. There are some quite similar in the rivers in the western part of Switzerland. And there the people say, well, they are fishing traps, mobile fishing traps. So we tried from moving from A to B, fishing traps, or as a mobile harbor for the pirogue. You have some things in the Valcamonica, some rock paintings. We can say, well, it's also trapezoid, and you have this big fish, could be the same. At the end, we don't know, but it's really a unique thing we found there, now 1 kilometer far away from the lake. Another aspect, for closing very slowly, traffic. Traffic is also, we have the settlements, we have the fishing traps, we have these fishing relics. Traffic is also something. Of course, in the rivers, sometimes the bridges, these huge piles for the bridges, and much more interesting, we had a situation at the Lake of Zurich, at the eastern part of it. We have this situation here. It's about 1 kilometer of distance between the two borders. You have today, of course, the whole traffic from the railway, from the bicycles and the cars, of course. You have a reconstruction of a medieval bridge here for the tourists. Works very well. You see, it's quite flat. You have no more than 2 meters of depth between this whole thing. It's ideal to cross. And you have here this for the ships. And there was also a sport diver who told us, hey, I found some piles. The geological situations where you see you have a lot of stones from the glacier ages found there. So it was really, you could cross the lake here by jumping from one stone to the other and perhaps to doing some bridges, but not very long. You can manage it. And if you look at the 18th century, there are some historic images of the whole thing with this fishing trap structures we know, and this very easy done pilgrim bridge from Rapperswil with this castle to the other part, to the monastery of Einsiedeln. And we have also an old map where it shows, and it's interesting, this bridge does not use the shortest distance. It makes a little bit more than is necessary. That's the red one. And the green one would be the ideal line. And in this green line, the sport diver told us he has found some piles. We had some aerial photos. You see here the modern bridge. And what you see first is this thing here. That's also it's only a water pipe to the island there. But you have something else going here. And we had the chance to do their 2 projects over the winter. And at the end, we had a collection of rests of bridges. The number 1 and 2 is Roman and medieval. 3, 4, and 5, no, 3 and 5 are Iron Age. 4 and 6 are Bronze Age. We also had, that was very interesting, the negatives of horse traps. We know that from the 13th century, people were obliged to cross the lake by taking the bridge and to pay a fare. And this must be older. We also found some horseshoes. They are from the 10th, 11th century. So perhaps we have here really horse traps about 1,000 years old. We found a lot of pilgrim badges, perhaps thrown there to hope to cross the whole thing safe. And it looks really totally different to today. The diving was there between the modern bridges. And there we had really these huge piles from early medieval times and Romans. We had some Roman relics there, horse trances. And we had, and that was much more interesting for us, we had these early Bronze Age bridges rests at the land and going to the water, and you see there going up to the other side there. More than 1 kilometer early Bronze Age, dendrodated early Bronze Age bridge. The constructions, sometimes they are still there, very eroded. And another interesting thing is, if you have a bridge, or if you're visiting the crocodiles in the zoo, or you're going to the Fontana di Trevi in Roma, I don't know why, but you throw some coins and some material in there. And today you have the small chapels and you give something, but it had been the same in the Bronze Age. We found a lot of weapons and of needles there between the piles on these lines. So it had been an offering of fantastic materials. The needles, we don't know them in Switzerland. They are more from the southern part of Germany, so foreign materials. So we also decided at the end to do a little bit the whole area with a detector, to be sure to find more of the objects. Copper, knives, a little bit of pottery, and if reconstruction looks like that. You have these 5-6 meters wide these piles. In between you have some construction details, and you have a lot of these offerings. We had an exhibition, tried to reconstruct that a little bit, and it's still the same as you have in the medieval times here with this small chapel on the same place. And that's some idea of what's there. The sword was found in the 19th century when they built the railway bridge. It was a little bit too early for us, but the rest is from these diving activities. Well, now I showed you a lot about archaeology, underwater archaeology, these finds and these objects and these settlements. It's not our job to do excavations. It's our job to protect the things for further generations. The best excavation is the excavation we don't have to do. It costs so much money, and it's not very shows not very lot of responsibility. In 40 years, we are better. We know more. We have better equipment. We have other questions. So it's really, we have to decide, why do we excavate? Are there no other solutions? So protection is very important. In the Lake of Zurich is a touristy lake. Has a bit other problems than other lakes, but in Zurich, in a summer day, or as it had been yesterday here in Brussels, you have thousands of ships on the lake, and they are throwing their anchor into the sides, 1 meter, 2 meters depth, and if they go away, they take it out, and they have this grabbing things and destroying within minutes, a lot of very interesting historical finds. We have a lot of places where people have their boat in the lake on a buoy, but the buoy is on a chain on a stone that lies on the ground. And this chain has to be
longer than too short, because if the lake level moves, needs some mobility. The problem is, it's like a big gun doing all the way, moving on the surface and doing some destructions all over the months and the years. And at the end, you have situations like that, the things that were covered, and you go the next year, you find suddenly late Bronze Age ceramics. And if you go 5 years later, you won't find any late Bronze Age anymore. It's destroyed, but now you're in the late Neolithic. And the next 10 years, it's all gone. So that's the problem. But now we had here a very nice wooden artifact from the late Bronze Age side. And also here the upper part is gone away because of the chains. So that's one of our jobs, not to excavate, but to find solutions. What can we do to protect the whole thing? That's a situation with different boats, with a buoy, with a chain, too long, and with all these destruction signs. And that's going quite quick. So the solution here is quite an easy one. A second buoy, so that you have still this mobility because of the lake level moving, but you have no more contact of the chain with the surface. It costs about 50 euros plus half an hour of a sport diver to do that like that. And at the end, you have not pictures like that anymore. At the end, we have about 12 sites like that in the Lake of Zurich, and now we manage them like that. But one of the jobs is, and that's a very boring one, to check all 2 or 3 years, is it still working? But it's one of the part of the jobs. Another one is, there's a lot of building activity because of water tubes, electricity, and a lot of digging activity, not archaeological ones, but by industry. And also here, if you have these photos from the air, you see these destructions at the end. Well, you could say, well, someone has done his job, and now you can check the stratigraphy. You don't have to dig. There was someone else who did it. And you see also here these buoys. And if it's really shallow water, they even touch the ground with the ship itself there. So we try to avoid these anchor zones. We have some anchor zones. We say it's forbidden to anchor here. That's something we do together with a lot of other institutions in the government. But that works at the end. It's forbidden there. And we had a very interesting project with our colleagues from the Lake of Constance, 3 other cantons and southern Germany, where we try to find out what's happening in these different sites. Why is it happening? And what are the solutions to avoid this erosion, these destructions? Are things like this, are they really working? Or is it 10 years later gone away and we have to do it once again? We had some table ronde with our colleagues from western part of Switzerland, but the problem is that the lakes in the western part of Switzerland, they work different than ours. They have much more stormy situations than we have. So it's not very comparable. Something we did, and we were convinced 10, 15 years ago that it works, is covering the surface with geotextile and putting some 10 to 15 centimeters of gravel on it to cover the whole thing. There we have the problem with the natural institutions who say, well, if you do that, then you don't have the fish anymore here to put their eggs. Because these are really big things we try to do, huge areas to cover, and then to fill with the gravel, and at the end it looks like that. That's an island we found 200 meters away from these Bronze Age bridges. It's the same dendrodates. So we have the bridge, and we have a settlement who used the bridge and who had the possibility to manage the traffic there. We covered it, no chance to do any excavations there the next 50 years, but it's safe. Another example, And that's also the part of archaeology, underwater archaeology, not to excavate, but to be there, to help, to protect the sites. And an interesting thing is what happens with the stones. If we do that, what happens with the stones? So we did, with this project with the Germans, we put some artificial stones on the site. They are magnetic, they have a magnetic core. So you can check them all the 2-4 years to go over, and then it shows where they are, so you can check the movement of the stones. And we have seen that there's a lot of movement. So the idea of putting the gravel on it is perhaps not so okay. The colleagues from Lac de Bienne, they put once the whole thing away and the geotextile, and it looks not very nice underneath. It works on there because there's some air, there's some movement still, even if you have this package of stones. Well, the end. We have also shipwrecks. We had a lot of shipwrecks in the seminar here, for example, in the Mediterranean. We have also some, but only from the 19th century, found by georadar. It's not our main topic to work with. We have one underwater archaeological museum installed with five of these information things for people to visit the shipwreck. It's about 13, 14 meters in deep. And well, that's it. It's not that what we're really doing in a concentrated way. It would be too much. We also have Romans. You remember this island? There we have a problem with these tourist things. We checked it once and we found some Roman coins. And we documented the surface, and we've seen there was a lot of destruction in the 19th century. You see the grabbing of the 19th century here, documented in gray. And you see this circle, the rest of piles of a Roman circular temple from the 2nd century AD. And it's quite far away here. But now we've done that, so it's not much more, nothing to do anymore. One of the last aspects, one of the most interesting things, we are part of the EU. If you look at the flintstones, we have a lot of flintstones in bad quality all around Zurich. There are some mines, there are some sources, and there's one is about 20 kilometers far away, looks a bit like honey colored. Another one, a white one, is about 40, 50 kilometers away. And we have found the mines, and we had a project from the National Research Fund where we could look at these things and to compare what we have there with the things we found in our underwater archaeological sites. It was totally different work here in the wood. But we found, and our colleagues from the Canton of Solothurn, we found these mines. We had some radiocarbon dates, so we are really in the 5th millennium BC. In the 4th millennium, we are at the same time as we have our lake sites. We had, for a golf place project, a site in the valley, and we had also there the chance to compare the materials. Interesting thing is, blue, Zurich, Lake of Zurich, and the mines near Zurich. But if you look at the material, we have a lot of material from the Bavarian parts of Germany, from France, of course, Grand Pressigny, and from Middle Italy. This thing here is from Middle Italy. We have a lot of them. They look quite the same. Here, these Bavarian and French examples. Because of the dendrochronology, we have the chance to compare the origin of the flints. And if you have these two sites, they are about the same age, 3,800, 3,700 BC, dendrodated. And you see, the first one has a lot of material from our site, near Zurich, and the other one has a lot of Bavarian, southeastern Germany material. So within 50, 80 years, something is happening, totally new resources That's something we try to check the next years. So why World Heritage? As a summary at the end, we have a fantastic preservation. We have a huge variety of cultures between the lakes. We can compare them. We can date them by year and try to find out what happened in the different regions. We have a lot of organic materials for the natural sciences. We have sometimes copper and other things to give us a good overview over the technology and the evolution of technology. It's our history, still our history. We have this gap between the western part of our country and the eastern one. We have a lot of challenges, protection, the managing of the whole thing. And it's really the networking thing. We have to change our information, to change our knowledge with our colleagues from other water archaeology groups all over the Middle Europe. So at the end, it's only this green small part we are doing on the water archaeology in Zurich. The rest is blue is a monument historique protection, and the red one is the rest of archaeology in our canton. So it's not much money for it. This I told you. We really have to be sure what we are doing and where we are doing it and where are we putting it all our resources, the money in. And that's why we need, and that's the first thing I would ever say, I always say, we need an inventory of the whole thing to be sure that we do the right thing. The diving group in 2014, that was what they were doing. There's a lot of administration stuff. There's a little bit of diving activities, but also here is of course there's one is on the boat, it's not diving. Also here's a lot of administration. Prospection to find new sites. Monitoring to check about erosion, visiting the places all 5, 7, 8 years. Inventory means also to do some sondage to find out a little bit more of the potential, the scientific potential of the sites, and protection. That's the thing for the moment we do the most time. To have our buffer zones, that they are always actual, to know in the different sites what do we have there. There are some new sites. We are totally surprised how many things there are still there. So at the end, and that's the last point, I'm finished. Thanks.